Michael Carter and Sarah Carter lived in a small house at the edge of a quiet American town called Maple Hollow. They had been married for 9 years, and despite never having much money, their home was always filled with laughter. Michael worked as a mechanic at the local garage, while Sarah taught piano lessons to neighborhood children. They had one son, Ethan, who was 7 years old, with curly brown hair and a smile that could light up the darkest room. Every evening, Michael would come home tired from work, but the moment he saw Ethan running toward him shouting, "Daddy's home," all his exhaustion disappeared. Sarah would cook dinner while humming old songs, and the three of them would sit together at their small wooden table, sharing stories about their day. Life was simple, but it was enough. Michael often told Sarah that he didn't need riches, because he already had everything he wanted in that little house. Sarah believed him completely, and she loved him with a quiet, steady love that never needed grand gestures. They had their struggles, of course, bills, old furniture, a car that broke down more than it ran, but they always faced these problems together, hand in hand. Neighbors often said that the Carters were the kind of family you wished you had. Nobody could have imagined that this peaceful life was about to be shattered by something neither Michael nor Sarah could control. It started with something small, Ethan complaining of headaches and feeling tired all the time. Sarah noticed it first, the way a mother always does. She brushed it off as exhaustion from school, but deep inside, a quiet fear had already begun to grow in her heart, a fear she could not yet name, but one that would soon change everything about the life they had built together. The headaches did not go away. Within weeks, Ethan began losing weight, and dark circles formed under his eyes. Sarah took him to the family doctor, who immediately referred them to a specialist at the city hospital. Michael took a day off work, something he rarely did, and the three of them sat in a cold waiting room, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and the sound of distant machines beeping. When the doctor finally called them in, his face was serious. He explained that Ethan had a rare blood disorder, one that required immediate and continuous treatment, including a specialized therapy not fully covered by their insurance. The cost, he said gently, would be nearly $200,000 over the next year alone. Michael felt the room spin. Sarah's hand trembled in his. Neither of them said a word for a long moment, because there was nothing to say. They were not rich people. They had a small savings account, barely enough to cover 3 months of rent, let alone a medical bill of that size. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Michael sat on the edge of their bed with his head in his hands. Sarah sat beside him, trying to stay strong, though her own heart was breaking. "We will find a way," she whispered, though she did not know how. Michael took on extra shifts at the garage, sometimes working 16 hours a day. Sarah sold her piano, the one she had owned since childhood, the one her late father had given her. She also took a second job at a diner, coming home smelling of coffee and fried food, her feet aching every night. They applied for loans, charity programs, anything they could think of. Some helped a little, but it was never enough. Slowly, desperation began to creep into their home, replacing the laughter that once filled it. Ethan's treatments continued, but the bills grew faster than they could pay them, and somewhere in the back of Sarah's mind, a terrifying thought began to form, one she pushed away again and again, refusing to let it take shape. One evening, after a particularly difficult shift at the diner, Sarah was approached by a man named Daniel Whitmore, a wealthy businessman who often dined there while in town for work. He had noticed Sarah's tired eyes and the way she sometimes wiped away tears when she thought no one was watching. Over the following weeks, Daniel began talking to her more, learning about Ethan's illness, about the mounting bills, about the desperation that had settled over the Carter household like a heavy fog. Daniel told her that he was a major donor at the very hospital where Ethan was being treated, and that he had connections that could help cover the remaining costs of Ethan's treatment, a treatment that, without help, would soon become impossible to afford. Sarah was hesitant at first, unwilling to accept charity from a stranger, but Daniel was patient, kind in his words, always careful never to ask for anything in return, at least not directly. He simply continued to be present, offering advice, occasionally paying small parts of the hospital bill without telling her, leaving her confused when the numbers on her statements did not add up. Slowly, his presence in her life became more frequent. He would call to check on Ethan. He would send flowers when she seemed especially exhausted. He told her things Michael, in his own exhaustion and stress, had stopped saying that she was strong, that she was doing an incredible job, that she deserved more than the burden she was carrying. Sarah found herself looking forward to his calls, not because she desired anything from him, but because in a life that had become nothing but fear and fatigue, his attention felt like the only soft thing left. She did not yet realize that Daniel's kindness was not without a price, and that the path he was slowly leading her down was one from which she might never be able to fully return, no matter how good her intentions had been when she first accepted his help. Months passed, and Ethan's condition began to stabilize, thanks largely to the additional treatments that Daniel had quietly arranged and partially funded. Sarah was grateful beyond words, but she also began to notice a shift in Daniel's behavior. His calls became longer. His comments became more personal. One evening, when she met him to discuss a new round of medical paperwork, he finally said what he had been hinting at for weeks, that he had fallen for her, that he could not stop thinking about her, and that he wanted more than friendship. Sarah was horrified. She told him firmly that she loved her husband, that nothing could change that, and that she would find another way to handle Ethan's bills without his help if that was the price he expected her to pay. Daniel did not argue. He simply said he understood, and that his offer to help with the hospital would still stand, with or without her affection, though his eyes told a different story, one of quiet expectation. Sarah walked away that night feeling sick with worry, not because of what Daniel wanted, but because she knew, deep down, that without his continued support, Ethan's treatment plan would collapse within weeks. She did not sleep that night. She lay beside Michael, who was snoring softly, unaware of the storm raging inside his wife's heart. The next morning, the hospital called. Ethan had developed a complication, and the doctors recommended an experimental procedure not covered by any insurance policy in the country, costing nearly $50,000 up front. Sarah sat in her car outside the hospital, her hands shaking as she dialed Daniel's number. He answered immediately, his voice calm, almost as if he had been waiting for this call. He told her he would take care of everything. All she had to do was agree to see him, just to talk, just to be near him sometimes. Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, and for the sake of her son's life, she whispered the word, "okay," not knowing that this single word would unravel everything she had built with Michael. Their meetings began innocently enough, quiet dinners in hotel restaurants outside of town, conversations about Ethan's recovery, about life, about things Sarah had buried deep inside herself for years. Daniel never pressured her physically, not at first, but emotionally. He wrapped himself around her loneliness like ivy around an old fence. He listened to her in ways Michael, drained from work and worry, no longer had the energy to. Sarah told herself repeatedly that this was simply the price of saving her son, that her heart still belonged entirely to Michael, that nothing happening in these secret meetings meant anything real. But slowly, dangerously, the lines began to blur. One rainy evening, after a particularly emotional conversation about how close they had come to losing Ethan, Daniel reached across the table and took her hand, and instead of pulling away, Sarah let him hold it, if only for a moment, if only because she was so tired of carrying everything alone. That single moment of weakness opened a door that should have remained shut forever. In the weeks that followed, what began as a desperate bargain slowly became something more complicated, more painful, more confusing for Sarah's already broken heart. She loved Michael. She still loved him with everything she had. But guilt, fear, gratitude, and loneliness had tangled themselves so tightly inside her that she no longer knew where one feeling ended and another began. Meanwhile, at home, Ethan continued to grow stronger, his color returning, his laughter coming back to fill the house once more. Michael, exhausted but hopeful, believed that some miracle, some unexpected insurance approval, had finally come through for them. He thanked God every night for their son's recovery, never once suspecting the true cost of that miracle, never imagining the secret his wife was carrying, hidden beneath every smile, beneath every "I love you," she still whispered to him at night, even as her heart slowly cracked apart from the weight of what she had done. As Ethan's health improved, Michael finally had a moment to breathe, and with that breath came clarity. He began reviewing their finances more closely, trying to understand how they had managed to cover such enormous medical costs. The numbers did not add up. Loans they had taken showed strange, early repayments. Hospital records showed donations from an anonymous source that the hospital staff vaguely referred to as a generous benefactor. Michael asked Sarah about it one night, casually at first, but her hesitation, her too quick answer, planted a seed of doubt in his mind that he could not shake. He started noticing other things too, how Sarah sometimes stepped outside to take phone calls, how she seemed distracted, how she flinched slightly whenever his phone buzzed during dinner. He told himself he was imagining things, that stress from Ethan's illness had made him paranoid, but the feeling refused to leave him. One afternoon, while looking for an old document in Sarah's car, he found a hotel receipt tucked beneath the passenger seat, dated weeks earlier, for a town nearly an hour away. His hands trembled as he held it. He told himself there could be a simple explanation. Perhaps it was for a medical conference. Perhaps it belonged to a coworker. Perhaps it meant nothing at all. But that night, watching Sarah tuck Ethan into bed, kissing his forehead, whispering a soft goodnight, Michael felt something cold settle in his chest, a quiet certainty that something was deeply wrong in his marriage, something his wife was hiding from him. He did not confront her immediately. Instead, he began watching more closely, listening more carefully, piecing together fragments of conversations and strange behaviors that he had previously ignored in his exhaustion. Each new piece of evidence cut into him like a blade, slowly carving away the trust that had taken 9 years to build, leaving him standing on a foundation that, unknown to him until now, had already begun to crumble beneath their feet. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Sarah had told Michael she was going to pick up Ethan's new medication from a pharmacy across town, a trip that usually took 30 minutes. 2 hours passed, and she still had not returned. Michael, now consumed by suspicion, decided to drive toward the pharmacy himself, hoping to ease his own anxious mind. On the way, he passed a small cafe on the edge of town, and through the window, he saw her, sitting across from a man he did not recognize, her hand resting gently on the table near his, both of them speaking with quiet familiarity that no stranger should share. Michael parked his car a short distance away, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He watched as the man reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind Sarah's ear, a small, tender gesture that told him everything he needed to know without a single word being spoken. He did not go inside. He could not bring himself to make a scene. Not yet, not until he understood. He drove home in silence, his mind replaying the image over and over, each replay sharpening the pain a little more. When Sarah finally returned home that night with a small pharmacy bag in her hand, Michael was sitting at the kitchen table, the lights dimmed, his face unreadable. He asked her calmly, almost too calmly, who the man at the cafe was. Sarah froze, the bag slipping slightly from her fingers. For a long, terrible moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with tears already forming in her eyes, she began to explain about Daniel, about the bills, about the impossible choice she had made to keep their son alive. Michael listened in silence, his hands clenched into fists beneath the table, his heart shattering with every word, torn between the unbearable gratitude for his son's life and the unbearable grief of his wife's betrayal. "I did it for him," Sarah sobbed, falling to her knees in front of Michael, her voice breaking under the weight of months of hidden guilt. "I did it because I was watching our son die, and I couldn't save him, and you were working yourself to exhaustion, and I had nothing left to give except myself." Michael sat in stunned silence, staring at the woman he had loved for 9 years, now a stranger to him in ways he never imagined possible. Part of him understood, truly understood, the impossible position she had been placed in. He had seen Ethan's pale face, had felt the same helplessness, had prayed the same desperate prayers in hospital hallways. But understanding the reason did not erase the pain of the betrayal itself. "You should have told me," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "We could have found another way. We could have lost the house. We could have lost everything else, but not this. Not us." Sarah had no answer, because deep down, she knew he was right, even as she knew she would have made the same impossible choice again if it meant saving her son's life. The days that followed were heavy with a silence neither of them knew how to break. Michael moved into the guest room. Ethan, now healthy and full of energy, ran through the house unaware that his recovery had cost his parents something far greater than money. Sarah tried to explain, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But every word felt hollow against the wound she had created. Michael was not a cruel man, and he did not hate her. In fact, he hated himself for still loving her despite everything. But love, he was slowly learning, was not always enough to repair what trust, once broken, had shattered into pieces too small and too sharp to ever be fully gathered back together again. A year passed. Michael and Sarah eventually separated, though neither of them ever stopped loving the other in some quiet, complicated way. Michael moved to a small apartment near the garage, seeing Ethan every weekend, watching him grow stronger, taller, happier, completely unaware of the sacrifice buried beneath his recovery. Sarah stayed in the small house, alone most nights, working extra shifts not out of desperation now, but out of a need to fill the silence that had replaced the laughter she once knew. Daniel had disappeared from her life not long after the truth came out, the arrangement having served its only purpose, leaving her with nothing but guilt and an empty house to carry it in. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Michael would sit in his small apartment, looking at an old photograph of the three of them together, taken before the diagnosis, before the bills, before everything fell apart. He would remember the woman who hummed old songs while cooking dinner, the woman who sold her father's piano without complaint, the woman who broke every rule of their marriage simply because she could not bear to lose her son. He never fully forgave her, but he also never fully stopped loving her, and that contradiction lived inside him like a quiet ache that never completely faded. Sarah, for her part, often stood by Ethan's bedroom window at night, watching him sleep peacefully, grateful beyond words for his health, yet haunted endlessly by the price she had paid to secure it. She had saved her son, but in doing so, she had lost the husband who had once been her entire world. Some nights, she whispered apologies into the darkness, knowing Michael would never hear them, knowing some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt, no matter how much love still smolders quietly in the ashes left behind.